melody and the a beautiful little prelude that just sort of seemed to drift up between John and Jeff into the wheel, into Bertha, into Let It Grow. It just had a. I was thinking it was all Jerry tunes up until that last one there,
Yeah,
with the
indeed.
modulo "Cold Rain and Snow" being an O'Bray Ramsey tune and all. But
Right.
it was a lovely set, really, really well played. And again, I'm watching with a friend here, and we're just thinking, there's just not a speck of cereal here, people. It's just really, really solid, great, inspired playing from top to bottom.
And we get to bring it to you every night, courtesy of Nugs.net. And before we get into the details about Nugs, which we are very enthusiastic about, a little bit of correction is in order. Um, we've been telling you that what you're hearing is the pristine front of house board mixes of the great Derek Featherstone. That's what the people in the building are hearing, and oh boy, are they lucky because Derek does such fantastic work making any venue sound like a cathedral. But the actual mix that's going out to you uh, comes from Ross Harris, who works with us at Nugs and does fantastic work. It's kind of like the setup the Grateful Dead had when they had Betty Cantor Jackson doing a whole separate mix just for recording.
Oh,
You know,
oh.
he's got a different board he works with, and then additionally, um, when they prep the music for streaming on Nugs and also for download, there's a remix, a second chance remix done, although Ross does a fantastic job in real time, by John Alschiller, who is a master of the craft. This is the guy who has been both preparing all of the live Bruce Springsteen stuff on his current tour for next day availability, and also is going back into the archives and remixing stuff like those phenomenal Bruce shows from the '70s and all those other eras. And
Wait, so this
and
guy's job is taking multi-track recordings and mixing them overnight so they can be put on for streaming like within 24 hours?
apparently, and then tweaking things, and he does Fish, and he does various other people in the Nugs family, which just shows you what a fantastic bunch of people we are working with, how much talent goes into all of this. And let me say one more thing, as long as we're giving credit where it's due. The last few years, we've been working with our friend Jacob Lima, who's done a fantastic job of making us sound good and not look too ridiculous. And Jacob is still part of the Nugs family, still working with us, but he's not available for every show because he's got a whole other gig going on. So we have a new member of the team, Lonnie Davis, who we haven't formally welcomed yet. But Jacob was there, I think, for Cornell, but he's mostly in the wings and giving advice and all that stuff. But Lonnie's doing the heavy lifting here, so we want to welcome Lonnie formally and give him our thanks for all he's doing. Doing great, Lonnie. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And this stream is being brought to you by Nugsnet. Either if you're either a Nugsnet subscriber watching the stream, then this sales pitch is not directed at you. But if you're one of the people watching on YouTube for the free preview, part of our mission here is to tell you how totally cool Nugsnet is. It's this online service for music that was organized by live music fans and tape traders and people just like freaks like us to make the best possible music available to the largest number of people. And over these last 20 plus years, the technology and the infrastructure to make all that happen has improved so dramatically. And I'm sitting here in my living room watching this incredible high quality video feed from Charlotte, North Carolina, and listening to it through my clip speakers in my living room. And I'm just enjoying the daylights out of it. And that's because Nugsnet exists, a live music oriented service that has seen to it that we have access to just ridiculous amounts of music from the current era and from various musical histories that are of great relevance and interest to great numbers of people.
Well put, sir. So we encourage you, if you haven't already, if you're watching this on the preview especially, to go to Nugs. They offer a free trial, by the way, so you can plunge in and see what's available, see what the library is of stuff that you can stream, things that you can download, and the live streams that are going out. not just by Dead and Company, but lots of other great bands. So, what have you got to lose? Try that free trial, and we think you'll probably get hooked pretty early, as we all have.
I think so.
And
Well, now
now,
on with the show. Yes.
yeah, we've been doing these interviews, and they've all been tremendously rewarding. We've got a few more coming up in the next few days, and this one was with one of our favorite people, someone who is such a valued member of our community and the world of concerned and socially responsible people at large. Andy Bernstein, the founder, executive director, who's about to become, I guess, executive director emeritus. He'll tell you about that in a little bit. Of Headcount, the organization that has registered 1.5 million or more voters during its fairly brief history. So we always love talking to Andy, and we hope you will give your full and undivided attention and think about what he has to say. We will not be back after the interview, so after that, there'll be this band playing a second set, which we think you'll also enjoy. So, shall we go to the interview and say goodnight? And we'll see you. Where's the next show? The next show is elsewhere in North Carolina, I think Raleigh, on Thursday. In the meantime, let's go to Andy Bernstein and David. Good night. Lonnie, good night.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Thank you,
enjoy the second
Nugs.
set.
Thank you, Lonnie. Enjoy.
Always happy to talk to a good friend of ours, a good friend of our community, and a good friend of democracy. Please welcome Executive Director of Headcount, Andy Bernstein.
Hi, Andy.
Thanks, guys. How are you? Good to see you.
Great to see you.
We are having a great time on the Dead and Company tour. Every show has been more exciting than the last one, and they seem to be raging through this final tour. And we're very happy to be doing this thing in between sets of bringing people like you to the listeners or viewers and share your cool stuff.
Well, I'll tell you, I was lucky enough to go to Cornell, and man, like what a show. I've been to, I'm going to guess 50 Dead and Company shows, and I've never walked out saying that was clearly the best show I've ever seen. And I walked out saying clearly, hands down, it was the best show. It just sparkled. There was a depth to it and energy, and the room and the history was incredible, but just note for note, that show really stood up. So I'm really excited for the tour. I'm going to go to more on this tour than I've been in a few years, probably ever, because hey, last tour, you got to show up, right?
Indeed. And as David and I have been able to pay close attention through this wonderful medium to each of the shows since Cornell, the quality and the energy has not flagged one bit. This band is really focused and purposeful and determined, much like Headcount, by the way. I was really glad that Cornell was a benefit for a couple of great causes. That made a lot of sense and is very consistent with the mission that has been going on since Dead and Company started. And I picked a special backdrop for you, Andy, Participation Row, which has been at every Dead and Company show. So why don't you tell people a little about Participation Row, and then we'll get into the mission of Headcount specifically.
Sure. So Participation Row is, I think we call it a social action village. It's basically a shakedown street for doing good. And we've been doing it since actually the 2016 summer tour was the first tour. We were out on the 2015 fall tour, but not quite with this setup. And as you can see behind you there's different booths, and hopefully anybody who's been to a Dead and Company show has walked by Participation Row. Every year we do a limited edition pin that says vote with some sort of Grateful Dead iconography, and you get those for free by going to 3 nonprofits and taking action. It'll also enter you to win a drawing for a signed D'Angelico guitar, signed by the band. AJ Masthag did the artwork, who did the official poster of the tour as well. So, man, I mean, so I guess, it's 7 years we've been doing this. It started at the Lock-In Festival years before that, probably 2014, 2013, somewhere in there. We did it at Fare Thee Well, the Grateful Dead 50th anniversary. And man, I really love Participation Row. I love being at the shows where we have Participation Row. I think it represents, all the things that we've learned collectively. I mean, we know how to throw a shakedown. We know how to find nonprofits that are part of the Grateful Dead community. I mean, we have Rex Foundation, we have Seva, some that date back to, original OG Grateful Dead, and you know, and then newer organizations that the band members are currently working with and things like that. So we get everybody together. We also raise money for every organization via our auctions. Reverb is out there as our partner, doing water bottles, Dead and Company water bottles, and eliminating single-use plastic. So it's just like so much good going on in one place, and we added it up. Over 100,000 actions have been taken. We've raised close to $3 million for the Dead family nonprofits, and I really love that Headcount. While we're known, of course, for doing voter registration, we really think of ourselves as community organizers, and this is an example of that. That we take all the know-how of what our scene can deliver and how to work with the band and the fans and the organizations, and create something that is not just about voting, but about participation, about civic participation, which is ultimately the true mission of Headcount. Voting is not an end. Voting is a means to an end. The end is a society where people participate and all voices are heard. And Participation Row is sort of a representation of that.
That's wonderful to read. And you guys have registered more than 1 million voters in 20 years, is that right?
Oh yeah, 1.2 million.
Hey.
Last year we did over 200,000. The year before, the 2020 year, the election before, we did over 400,000. So it's grown a lot. Yeah, I mean, I say to our team, you know, like if you walk down a busy street in a city, chances are you probably walk by somebody who registered to vote with Headcount. Like it's a lot of people we've touched at this point.
Yeah, and while Headcount is about getting people to participate in democracy, we've become so aware in recent years that there's a burning need to defend democracy and not take it for granted, because there are people who aren't crazy about democracy, really work to subvert it. I won't mention specifics because Headcount is nonpartisan, thankfully so. But we just had a lawsuit where one of the biggest media companies in the world was caught lying about voting machines, and trying to undermine public trust in voting machines. And that has a really corrosive effect. And no matter how many people we try to register, we also have to combat that end, all that disinformation.
Yeah, and what sort of breaks my heart is just the politicization of voting itself and elections themselves. And we're at a point where good, productive conversations can't even be had about the ways to conduct democracy. And here's something not a lot of people know. In 2021, there was one state out of all 50 that had meaningful bipartisan election reform, and it was the state of Kentucky. We don't think of Kentucky as this bastion of liberalism, but a Democratic governor, Republican-controlled state legislature, and they got together and they did some basic things that they could agree on. They could agree that the state needed more early voting. They could agree on a few of the basics where Kentucky was behind and Kentucky caught up. And it wasn't the finger pointing, and it wasn't this side is bad and this side is trying to steal elections, or this side, it was everybody getting together. And it happened once. And every other state moved in one direction or the other. Whereas one state figured out the things that everyone could agree on. And I think it's just really disappointing that our election systems themselves are used as political pawns. They're used for fundraising. They're used for all these things when, hey, if Kentucky can do it, the rest of the country can do it. We just need to agree that we want a system that is fair, accessible, and trustworthy, and work toward that instead of all the political jockeying that goes on around this issue, which in the end has very little to do with the issue. It has very little to do with how elections are actually performed, which is actually really boring. If you really get under the hood, elections, it's not that exciting in terms of the mechanics of running an election, but it's just become this flare-up point for the country where no matter what side you're on, you have very, very strong beliefs about your side's getting screwed and whatever. And the result is that the elections themselves are used politically to divide people. And that's really, it should be the opposite.
I've been seeing that my entire adult life. I turned 18 in time to vote in the 1972 presidential election when they had just lowered the voting age to 18. And from that time on to the present day, we've looked into this headwind of even people, over here on the granola side of the scale saying, don't vote, it only encourages them, and things like that. And I've come from the opposite. I come from a long line of civic-minded, freaks who believe that we should all participate. I've been saying that for years on the radio. Democracy works better when all of our voices are heard, when people are choosing to participate, and it's also been this kind of bumper sticker sentiment of, if you don't vote, you can't complain, which of course isn't entirely true. But I do wish more people would vote. I think the government and all of at every level would more reflect humanity if more of humanity participated.
What you're saying, David, also really gets back to the inspiration for forming Headcount back in 2004. In 1972, the first election, you participated, the highest turnout of young voters in history. And then,
Uh-oh.
We're having some trouble with Andy.
Andres Thompson had a quote. He said, if every deadhead in Florida had voted, the world would be a different place. And our inspiration, it was myself and the other people who formed Headcount at the beginning. We were like, well, our community has a lot of potential power. There are a lot of us to say we're everywhere. But there's probably a lot of people in our community who think, voting is for the man, voting is the system. I want to break the system. And when it came down to so few votes, and there were such, political consequences in the early 2000s with, war and all of these things, it was like, we've got to make sure at least our community, the Deadhead community, Phish fans, Dave Matthews fans, jam band scene, let's make sure that everybody recognizes that we can make a difference. There's a lot of us. And if we all make our voices heard, we might not agree on who we vote for, but we can all agree that I'd rather have a bunch of deadheads having their voices heard than a bunch of other factions in the world. And then Headcount, we evolved. We work with Harry Styles and Billie Eilish and Ariana Grande, to reach more young voters and reach, very diverse audiences. But there's still this idea of we're everywhere. If every deadhead votes, the world starts to feel the values that exist in our communities start to be reflected in policy and government. And that's a really, really exciting idea.
Well, let's look at something that's affected our world for a very long time. On that backdrop behind me, the Cannabis Voters Project is one of the organizations that's worked hand in hand with Headcount. And a few years ago, we had people serving these draconian prison sentences for possession of marijuana. Their slates have been largely wiped clean. And now we have legal, medical, and recreational marijuana in more and more states all the time. And that is as a result of people participating in democracy.
Yeah, well, Cannabis Voter Project is a project of Headcount, and it's gone through a few iterations, but the idea was, well, there's still some people out there who feel that voting doesn't make a difference. But if you ask them, how they feel about cannabis and legalization and the referendums that were consistently the way these things were getting, states were legalizing, suddenly they had a completely different view of voting. So it's kind of about meeting people where they are. We launched that project several years ago to, one, give people just information like, do you know where your member of Congress stands on legalization? Most people don't. How would you know that? So we have a website, cannabisvoter.info, where you can look up your member of Congress and find out their voting record on cannabis and speak out to them directly. You can also register to vote. You can also find out what's going on in your individual state as it relates to cannabis legalization. And it all gets back to this idea of citizen power. That when we speak out, when we organize, when we work toward our own collective values, the world changes. And when you think about the changes that have happened, when you think about the majority of states in America now having some sort of legal cannabis, I mean, it's mind blowing. Like that, when headcount started, that was definitely not the case. So we've seen just in very recent history a citizens' revolution, really.
Well, and in my lifetime, when I was already in my teens, I was living in a country where in many states, members of one racial group could not vote. And to support something like Headcount is to honor the memory of people like John Lewis and Martin Luther King, who put their lives on the line, and people who died for the right to vote. And that to me is kind of a sacred trust. We have to remember those people who were denied participation in democracy for so long. Women, not until the early 20th century, had that right. So when you support an organization like Headcount, you are really carrying on a legacy of justice. And I think that's really important. And I'm so grateful to Headcount for existing and doing that.
Well, I'm grateful to you guys. You've been giving us such a great platform to raise awareness of what we're doing, both through the live streams more recently and for years with the Golden Road. And every time I'm a guest on one of your shows, I always get my phone lights up. And you guys, I really think that what you guys have done is brought voices of people who've been, had a front row seat for all of it. You guys were there for the Grateful Dead, and I love that our community, that you guys have such an important place in it, that we have, a lot has changed, but a lot hasn't, and we still can count on the two of you to give, wonderful narration, and we sort of, you reflect all of our experiences, and I think it's Dead and Company in particular. I would just love to see how it has honored the past, and it has brought voices. It's given so many of us another opportunity to share our voice, whether it's Headcount encouraging voting or you guys encouraging fandom in all the best ways. Like we really have gotten to take what was this wonderful gift of Dead and its legacy, and had the opportunity to keep it doing positive things. And you guys are worthy of great praise and be part of that story.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, but enough about us. Let's talk about your future. You recently announced that you're going to be stepping into a different role at Headcount. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I announced that this is going to be my last year as executive director. So I helped start the organization in 2004. So it'll be 20 years coming up. There's a lot of reasons for it, but really it's about that new blood. It's like, we primarily, our focus is on registering young voters, registering and turning out and engaging young voters. And, I can talk a lot about a lot of things, but one of the things that I'm not really personally connected to is youth culture in America. And so I think that for the organization to really thrive, there's just at some point the baton has to be passed. I say I'm not going to take Headcount to the grave. That's not good for me or for Headcount. So I'm really excited about the future. We are actively interviewing candidates to be the new executive director, but I'm still going to play an important role. I'm just going to be more of an advisor. I'll continue to probably be, in terms of like the Dead community and the festival community and jam scene, like I'll take with me to the grave. That I'll always be a part of, and I'll probably always be Headcount's ambassador in that community. But there are a lot of other communities we work in, and I'm really excited to see a future that reflects, a country that is extremely diverse. 45% of young people are non-white. A country that has very diverse musical tastes, and there are so many different genres of music and so much art and creativity, and Headcount can be a connecting point around all of that in voting. And so somebody is going to, it's not, I tell anybody who's interested, I was like, don't expect it to be easy. At least it wasn't for me. But it'll be very rewarding.
And I think that's really sharp and smart that you're doing this now, because you, over the course of your time with Headcount, you have literally become an old white guy with a gray beard. It's a good idea to bring somebody in who more closely resembles the demographic you're reaching out to, while you continue to do the things that you are most valuable for in the organization.
That's exactly it. And it's so true. You know, when I got started, I was 32 and I was, living in New York City. I was going and seeing live music probably two or at least twice a week, probably more. I felt so connected to this one community that I was part of. And when we formed Headcount, the last thing we were thinking about was anything other than that community. To us, Dave Matthews was the big pop star. Like, this was about the Dead and Fish and Mo and the Disco Biscuits and Government Mule and all the bands we were going and seeing. And now the organization is very different. We work with hundreds of bands, and there are volunteers who probably have no idea who any of those bands I just said are.
Right.
And that's great because they're, we're all working together. Yeah, I was and I like to say I'm very immature. So at 32, I was basically acting 22 and right in there. And then lo and behold, 20 years later, gray beard, used to have hair, all of it. And I know, like, you gain wisdom, you gain incredibly valuable knowledge, but you also know what you don't know, or you hopefully at least are humble enough to know that there's a lot you don't know. And when you can bring in other ideas and other people with other perspectives, you hopefully just don't lose anything and you gain everything. And so yeah, I'm ready to Gary and I talked once about we want to start a home for old deadheads. And Gary, I haven't forgotten that.
No, nor have I.
That could be the next venture.
Well, I'm already a pretty old deadhead, so I better, get my entry pretty soon. But Andy, I just want to say that, I've been around Headcount since its very beginnings, and I saw people who started with Headcount very young grow into their
has no faith. Like a child, she's been, she's not to blame. Pose for flight, wings spread wide, spring from night into the sun. Don't stop to run. She can fly like a light, she can't be rainy day. You can ring like fire when you lose your way. Oh, my. Roll away the dew. Roll away the dew. Yeah. Roll away the dew. Roll away the dew. God save that child who rings that bell. The man won't go ring, baby, you can't tell. One watch by night, one watch by day. If you get confused, listen to the music play. Oh, no. Some come alive, they passed away. Some come to make it just one more day. Whichever way your pleasure takes. If you play nice, you're gonna harvest the wind. You got to roll away the dew. Roll away the dew. Roll away the dew. Roll away the dew. And Franklin's tired of falling asleep. Like falling hounds in that house key. Oh yeah. Wildflowers sit on the sand in the wind. May the forest blow you home again. Now roll away the dew. 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 Roll away. Roll away the dew.
Thank you.